The B-36 was born out of the fear that if Britain fell in WW2, the US would need a bomber that could fly from America to Germany and back without refueling. Act 1 introduces this Aluminum Overcast. It was so big that the wings were 7 feet thick. Engineers could actually crawl inside the wings to fix the engines while the plane was in flight. We explore the illegal scale of the machine. Its tires were so heavy they would crack civilian runways instantly, and its engines were so complex they caught fire on almost every single flight. It was a plane built for a war that was too big to happen. The mid-1950s was a decade of forbidden science, where the fear of the Cold War overrode the survival instinct of the human race. The Air Force had a problem. The B-36 was massive, but its range was still limited by the thousands of gallons of fuel it had to carry. Their illegal solution was the NB-36H, a project so reckless it sounds like science fiction. They decided to put a live 1-megawatt nuclear reactor inside the fuselage to see if atomic power could keep a bomber in the air for weeks at a time without ever landing. This wasn't just a test, it was a gamble with the atmosphere of the entire North American continent. To make this work, the engineering was purely survivalist. The cockpit was transformed into a 5-ton lead and rubber tomb. The crew sat behind a lead glass windshield that was nearly a foot thick just to keep the radiation from liquefying their organs while they flew. There was no internal connection between the cockpit and the rest of the plane. If you were in the front, you were safe, but the rest of the Aluminum Overcast was a hot zone. This segment explores the illegal cooling system. Because they couldn't figure out a closed-loop system yet, the reactor was cooled by air taken directly from the outside and then blasted back out into the sky. Every time the NB-36H flew, it was effectively spraying the clouds with radioactive isotopes. The secret protocol of these flights was even more chilling. Every time the nuclear-powered B-36 took off from Fort Worth, Texas, it was followed by a C-97 transport plane filled with elite paratroopers. Their illegal orders were simple but horrifying. If the NB-36H crashed, they were to jump immediately, no matter where the plane went down, and seal off the area. They were instructed to shoot anyone who tried to enter the crash site and were prepared to stay in the radioactive kill zone until they were relieved or succumbed to radiation themselves. The government was more afraid of the public seeing the wreckage of a nuclear reactor than they were of the fallout itself. We dive into the red line incidents, the moments when the reactor almost went critical in mid-air. On several flights, the cooling fans struggled with the massive heat generated by the core, and the crew reported the lead shielding becoming hot to the touch. This segment details the physical toll on the pilots who flew in constant fear of a silent death they couldn't see or smell. They were essentially flying a dirty bomb over the American Midwest 47 different times. The act concludes with the project's blackout cancellation in 1958, as the public began to realize that a single mechanical failure could turn a Nebraska cornfield into a permanent wasteland. The government quietly dismantled the NB-36H and buried the reactor in a high-security pit, ending the era of the most dangerous experiment in the history of aviation. By the late 1950s,
The comet never came close to altering the course of
B-36
the war.
Peacemaker had
But in
become
many
a
other ways,
victim of
Lippish's
its
brilliant
own
design did have
impossible
a tremendous
physics.
effect on the
It
course
was a
of aviation
machine
history
designed
and
for a
modern life
world
itself.
that no longer existed, and its illegal exit from the world stage was just as chaotic as its birth. This segment dives into the sonic death, the phenomenon where the B-36 became the only aircraft in history to be classified as a public health hazard simply by existing. The sheer vibration of its six 3,800-horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines, combined with four General Electric J-47 jets, created a low-frequency resonance that was essentially a weapon. We explore the forbidden reports from towns in the flight paths of these behemoths, where the sound didn't just hurt the ears, it vibrated the human chest cavity so violently that ground crews reported nausea, vertigo, and a terrifying sensation of internal organ shifting. The physical destruction caused by the B-36's illegal acoustics was staggering. This act details the civilian toll. In rural communities surrounding Air Force bases, the B-36 was known as the window breaker. As the plane passed overhead at low altitudes, the 19-foot-wide propellers, the largest ever fitted to a production aircraft, acted like giant acoustic hammers. Entire blocks of houses would have their windows shattered simultaneously. In some cases, the vibrations were so deep and resonant that they caused the lime mortar in older brick chimneys to crumble, leading to house fires and structural collapses. The government was forced to pay out millions in vibration damages, a secret ledger that revealed the plane was literally shaking the country it was supposed to protect. The act then moves into the illegal Magnesium Massacre, the terrifying reality of the B-36's internal chemistry. Because the plane was too heavy for a standard steel or aluminum frame, engineers used massive amounts of magnesium. This made the B-36 a flying matchstick. If an engine caught fire, which happened frequently due to the 6-turning, 4-burning complexity, the magnesium frame would ignite. Once a magnesium fire starts, it cannot be put out with water. In fact, adding water only makes it burn hotter and more violently. We detail the illegal safety drills, where fire crews were told that if a B-36 caught fire on the runway, their only job was to run in the opposite direction and wait for the billion-dollar aircraft to burn itself into a white-hot puddle of slag. As we reach the heart of the story, we examine the illegal obsolescence of the Peacemaker. While the B-36 was a giant, it was a slow one. With a top speed of only 435 miles per hour, it was a sitting duck for the new generation of Soviet jet interceptors, the MiG-15s. We explore the secret war games where the Air Force realized that in a real conflict, every single B-36 would likely be shot down before it even reached the Soviet border. This led to the rise of the B-52 Stratofortress, a sleek all-jet successor that could do everything the B-36 could do, but faster and without the risk of a nuclear meltdown or a magnesium fire. The B-36 was suddenly a ghost, a relic of a super bomber dream that had turned into a logistical nightmare. The final minutes of the story focus on the massive burial. Between 1958 and 1959, the entire fleet of B-36s, nearly 400 aircraft, was systematically retired. But you don't just retire a plane the size of a skyscraper. This segment describes the illegal scrapping process. The planes were flown to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, where they were ripped apart by massive guillotines. Because the magnesium and radioactive components were so toxic, much of the fleet couldn't be recycled. we conclude with the legacy of the last surviving peacemakers, giant hollowed-out titans sitting in desert museums. They are the ultimate symbols of Cold War overkill, a machine that was too loud to live, too dangerous to fly, and so big that the world literally had to break it into pieces to move on.